Hey guys, my name is Matt Johnson with whoismatt.com, and this is the brand new Sony 35mm f1.4 GM lens. Today, I have the task of making arguably the easiest camera lens review for filmmakers that I've ever made. Why, you ask? Because I feel like I've already made this lens review. Seriously, go do me a favor. Pause this video, go to a new tab, look up my Sony 24mm f1.4 GM lens review, and watch that. Here, you probably don't want to click away, so let me summarize it for you. I concluded my review of the 24mm GM saying it is the best 24mm lens that I have ever used. And now, having used this new 35mm, it is just as incredible as the 24mm, with the only difference being that it gives you 11 more millimeters of focal length. There's the review. Done. I'm sure you want more details though. But before I get into those, for the sake of ethics, I want you to know that while this lens was sent to me by Sony to try out, I'm not being paid to make this video. It isn't sponsored in any way. And the first time that Sony sees this video is the same time that you see it whenever I upload it to YouTube. Now, if you've watched any of my lens reviews or my wedding filmmaking behind the scenes videos, you'll know that I really have two focal lengths that I love filming with. A 24mm for wide gimbal shots and a versatile 50mm for medium and tight shots. I've used these two focal lengths with lenses from various manufacturers for about the last 7 years now, never really straying from my choices or being unhappy with the shots that I've been getting. But after 7 years, having had some time quarantined to re-examine my shooting style as a filmmaker, I've started to wonder, if I love the 24mm and 50mm so much, doesn't it make sense that I would also love a lens that's almost a hybrid of the two? A 35mm? Thankfully, I had the chance to investigate this new potential love when my friends at Sigma sent me their brand new 35mm f1.2 lens a couple months ago. I used that lens to film a wedding, and my goodness, the image quality is phenomenal, and that bokeh is so buttery at f1.2. I also found that I really enjoyed that focal length because I was able to back up a little bit from my subject and get a similar feeling that I get from shooting with my 24mm, or walk a little bit closer and still have the lens be tight enough for more detail-oriented shots that I would get with my 50. All that said though, the Sigma 35 f1.2 has one big problem. It's big. The lens itself is big. That's its big problem. Now, if I was a hobby filmmaker that filmed short videos occasionally, or if I filmed a ton on a tripod, I would absolutely love the Sigma 35. But as a wedding filmmaker that needs to carry around a lens all day, often handheld, the Sigma 35 1.2 is too big and too heavy for me to recommend. By the end of the wedding day, my arms were burning. This lens is exhausting. I want to recommend it so bad because at f1.2 it looks so good, but it's just too heavy. Enter the new Sony 35mm GM. It's f1.4, so you're not getting that insane f1.2 bokeh, but this lens is tiny in comparison to the Sigma. I wish I still had the Sigma to show you a side-by-side, but take my word for it, the Sony is a baby. It's not only physically smaller than the Sigma 35 1.2, but it's also under half the weight. We're talking 524 grams for the Sony compared to 1,090 grams for the Sigma. And this size compares extremely well against other 35mm lenses from other manufacturers. Compare that 524 grams to 755 for the regular Sigma 35mm f1.4, or 760 grams for the Canon 35 1.4. Heck, Sony themselves have their earlier Distagon FE 35mm lens that comes in at 630 grams. So this is a nice weight saving. Here's what really freaked me out about this lens size though. I was preparing to shoot a YouTube video, and when I do that, I always grab my 24mm lens to film myself talking. I was halfway through the process of setting up my camera for video when I finally looked down and realized, oh, I grabbed the 35mm lens and put it on my camera instead of the 24. These two lenses are that similar. The 35mm is just slightly longer and barely heavier, and if you're not paying attention, it is very difficult to distinguish between the two at a glance. Not bad for two lenses with such different focal lengths. Looking at the physical design of the 35mm compared to the 24mm now, you'll see that it carries the exact same feature set that is perfect for filmmakers. It's well built, weather sealed, and it includes features like a dedicated autofocus or manual focus switch on the side that makes it super quick to switch between those two settings. It also has my favorite feature of all. You get full aperture control on the lens, including a clickless aperture switch, so you can smoothly adjust your aperture while recording. Now, I don't have access to any MTF charts or way to scientifically measure the sharpness of this lens, but what I can tell you is that to my eye, this lens has very similar optical performance to the already stellar Sony 24mm. It's sharp to the corners and it looks very creamy at f1.4. Keeping up with the similarity to the Sony 24mm, the autofocus performance of the 35 is just as good. It's fast, it's responsive, I detect autofocus with my A7S III, locks on and holds very well, even at f1.4. As a stress test, I filmed a couple running with the 35mm on my A7S III while I was running alongside them. Also, I was handheld and shooting at 120 frames per second. There's definitely some camera shake, but autofocus held on like a champ. I have more good news for filmmakers too, because this lens is nearly silent when autofocusing. I have to literally put my ear up next to it to hear the motors working. This is fantastic news if you're filming, say, a talking head interview in a quiet room or any other audio critical scenario where you want to make sure that you're not picking up any lens noise. Now, talking manual focus for a second, this lens is focus by wire like all of Sony's other lenses. But unlike with past lenses, I feel like with the GM line, Sony has finally made their lenses fast enough where there's no discernible lag between you rotating the focus ring and the lens focusing. Just like the Sony 24mm, you should have no qualms about switching this lens to manual focus if you need to, and it should perform very well. Wrapping up this lens review, let's talk about price. I feel like this lens is living in that meme where Sony's lens engineer asked the executives, "How similar do you want this lens to be to the 24mm?" And the executives say, "Yes," because that similarity carries over to the price of this lens as well. The Sony 24mm comes in at $1,400. What about the 35mm? How about yet again, $1,400. I think this is a fair price, especially whenever you consider the competition like Canon is charging $1,800 for their EF mount 35mm. And while they do sell an RF mount 35mm at $500, that lens is only f1.8. Sigma, on the other hand, comes in with a nice value option for their 35 1.4 at $900, but if you want that 35 1.2, you better be ready to pony up $1,500. So if I was you, if you don't have the $1,400 to go with the Sony, go with the Sigma 35 1.4. But for me, the size, autofocus capabilities, and the image quality that I can get from such a small package make the Sony 35 GM a no-brainer. It's an easy recommendation, just like Sony's 24. With that, thank you so much for watching. This has been the easiest review ever. I'll link to all of these lenses that I've talked about down in the video description next to the like button if you want to check them out. Also, it would be a huge help to me if you would consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Lastly, I've been starting to post more educational videos on my Instagram. I'll link to that down below as well. Do you happen to be a wedding filmmaker like me? You probably want to book more couples and film more weddings. To help you out with that, I've created a free guide that's going to walk you through some practical steps that you can take right now in your business to book more couples and film more weddings. It's a completely free gift to you. You can download it at the link down in the video description. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.